I have another story that was told to me by someone, although it's believable. I know some people are inclined to think the story may have become over-exaggerated, but here it is. Again, the strange things started happening when a family moved into a new home in Sydney, Australia. The first strange happening was the wife had just put her two boys to bed for an afternoon nap and was ironing when she heard whispers coming from one of her son's rooms. Confused, she walked into his room and found him sitting up in bed talking to someone. She asked who he was speaking to, and he replied, "The lady in the spare bed." When she looked, however, at the bed next to him, it was empty. Thinking that her small son had simply invented an imaginary friend, she thought nothing of it. Throughout the first weeks of living in the house, her son continued to play and talk with the lady in the spare bed, until one day when the wife was cleaning the playroom where her son spent most of his time playing with his younger brother and the lady in the spare bed, she found her long black hair on the floor. This was strange, as she was the only member of the family to have long hair, and hers was blonde. At first she dismissed the idea that it was anything unusual about the black hair, until she continued to find more and more of it wherever her son played. Then one afternoon she walked in on her two children playing hairdressers. The room was cold despite the fact the windows were closed, but she figured it might be the air conditioning. She noticed her son was holding her brush and she asked what he was doing with it. He replied, brushing the lady's hair, but she's gone away now. She looked at the brush and was horrified to see that it had long black strands of hair in it alongside her blonde hair. She asked her son, "Is the lady's hair black?" And he grinned, saying, "Mummy, you can see her too." She asked if she was in the room, and he nodded and pointed to the corner. But when she looked, there was nothing there. After the brush incident, the wife continued to live in fear of the women, telling her boys not to play with whatever it was with the long black hair. It was late afternoon when she was washing dishes, both her sons in bed and her husband at work, when she heard the patter of feet behind her and felt someone brush against her back. When she turned, nothing was there. And this is where our story ends. I have not yet found out if they still live in the house with the women, or whether they attempted to get the women out of the house. But there is one question I would like to ask. Is this a demon or a ghost? I originally thought it was a ghost, but if this is so, is it possible that you could brush a ghost hair or feel it brush against you? Yet if it was a demon, surely the wife would be able to see it as well as the children. I will be happy to hear what people have to say on this. I'm in my mid to late 30s now, and this is my unexplained story. And to this day I haven't heard of any encounters like mine. It was around 11:00-ish one warm spring night in the early 90s in an older neighborhood in El Paso, Texas. Myself and 3 other friends, Marco, Fernie, and Herman, not real names, were walking Fernie home, but we took a shorter route to his house, which led to the patio door of his residence. We started walking down B Street, and just before C Street we felt and then noticed someone walking behind us. We all turned and noticed a dark male-looking figure in the shadows standing in the middle of the B Street. What was odd was that there was just enough light for us to make out facial features, but we couldn't. It was a solid black being. Herman or Marco shouted at it, using profanity, but it just stood there. All of a sudden it stretched out its arms to its side and started approaching us. Not knowing what to think, we started running, and as we ran towards the corner of B and C streets, I remember we all looked back and saw this figure walking in a normal pace, but its arms were longer and seemed to be growing. I also remember that corner was more lit, but this being was still solid black. We cut towards a street using C Street, and as we approached that corner we looked back and it was nowhere in sight. But to our surprise, this figure was now on a street approaching C Street. It was still a solid black figure, and this time under a light post on a street. It was still walking at a normal pace, and its arms were longer now. We couldn't believe it. We actually stopped running and stood there at the corner watching this thing. Though I can't remember what profanities we shouted at it as we stood there, it still kept walking towards us. Then it picked up its pace, so we started running down the street towards Fernie's patio door at the end of a street. I turned one last time before reaching our destination, and this thing was a lot closer than I thought. Then when we reached the patio door, we all looked up a street, and this being was nowhere in sight. It was gone just like that. After talking about it later on, we all agreed that the best comparison was to Freddy Krueger in one of the earlier Nightmare on Elm Street movies, in a scene where it's his shadow or silhouette scratching the walls and his arms get longer. There are more unexplained experiences we had, but this was the first one we had together. Freaky. The following is true. My friend is crazy. Like she's seriously classified as crazy. She's medically diagnosed as a schizophrenic. She's really kind though and believes in all sorts of stuff. She always tells me about what she sees, and sometimes it's completely horrifying. She predicted the Boston Marathon bombing and called me crying because she had had a nightmare of people blowing up at a race. It sounds highly unbelievable, but that's what I thought too, until a day later she called me again bawling about it happening for real. Now, I've always believed in things that went bump in the night, but until my friend I had only experienced small things as a child, such as a girl covered in burns who was my imaginary friend and talking to the women who lived in trees. Things that don't really qualify as abnormal for a child. I mean, I'm definitely not normal. Normal people don't lose things and start screaming at hobgoblins for taking it. All the same, I never experienced what she did. There was one night I stayed at her house with another friend, and we all decided we were bored and did a summoning spell for a demon. I never said any of us were particularly bright. So we did this spell, and then weird things began to happen at my friend's house and just around us in general. Right after the summoning, something pulled my hat off my head really hard, like it was funny to try and scare me, which it did, seeing as the other two were on the opposite side of the table and could not reach me. Then we all started to see things and hear things, and upon going home were a little bit more than frightened, especially when every shadow moved in our vision and things were being moved around and we were being tugged and pulled at like toys. I got used to it faster than the other girls. As soon as whatever was tormenting us couldn't get a reaction out of me, things got even worse. A black bird flew into my window and killed itself. Things stopped just hiding in the shadows. I would see them in the middle of the street at night, these tall, shadowy figures, and hear them chuckle when I screamed at them to stay away. Then one night, when I was sleeping, I met one in a dream. It spoke in a tongue I shouldn't have understood, but did. It told me to give myself up and just fall the rest away. It turned me to a mirror and showed me myself with beautiful gold and white robes on, robes that had been torn and were now rags, sad and limply hanging to my body and keeping me decent. My blonde curls hung below my hips and were in a disarray. My skin was torn and ripped in places, and feathers fell down around me in the mirror. Then I acted on impulse, understanding nothing but what I did, and pulled a sword from nowhere and cut the creature down. It choked out something about how it was told to expect this much and died. I woke up and it had all stopped. There wasn't any moving shadows, no whispers. My friends had stopped being toyed with too. I wrote it all off, my crazy dream and overactive imagination. But as I said, my friend is crazy. She kept doing these summonings and such until it drove her mad, and she told me she was going to call on an angel for help. She figured that they were the only thing left to stop it all, and so she called the two most well-known angels, Michael and Gabriel. Only one showed up, Michael. He showed up with another one too, Raphael, but not Gabriel. She asked them to help her, and they did. They got rid of whatever it was that was so terrible. She was telling me this and kept asking me why Gabriel never showed. For some reason, my only response was, "How is he?" Now, I'm not claiming to be anything special. I'm not claiming to be something so important. But for some reason an angel was bewildered when he heard my name. For some reason an angel had a hard time believing that I was involved with a girl who's closer to demons than she'll ever be to God. For some reason or another he muttered to himself, as he left in voice just loud enough for her to hear, "She will need more protection if they can tell who she is." I'm not claiming to have any relation at all to angels, though in my dreams there always seems to be one standing and watching from a corner. I'm not going to say my name is proof that I very well may be involved with angels. I'm not claiming to somehow be something other than what I am. After all, my friend is crazy. I'm just a teenage girl. But can you guess my name? Can it really all be just by chance? Well, as much as I can remember, I was about 9 or 10 and I lived in Bucksport, Maine, literally 50 steps from the graveyard of the famous Witch's Foot, right across from the Hannaford that my mom went grocery shopping at. I really hope you believe this story, because so many people don't. I shared a room with my sister and we slept on a bunk bed together. One night, as I usually did, I woke up in the middle of the night. So, as I said, this was not uncommon for me. So I woke up and saw my sister. The bunk bed was pushed up all the way against the wall, and my sister was sleeping on the top bed with me that night. Anyways, back to the story. I woke up and saw my sister sitting straight up against the wall with her legs across the bed. But her legs were not over my legs. So I said, "Vicky, go to bed." Nothing happened. She didn't blink or move. She just stared straight ahead. Now, I know I was young, so people say I was dreaming, but it was common for me to wake up in the middle of the night, so I know I was not sleeping. So I repeated, "Vicky, go to bed." Then I felt a kick on my leg and looked to the other edge of the bed and saw my sister curled up in a ball by my feet. I started to get scared and looking back and forth between the two figures, trying to figure out what happened. Next, I saw the eyes of the figure propped up against the wall turn slightly towards me. Unable to move or breathe, I just kept putting my head underneath my pillow. I did that several times until the figure disappeared. See, one way I know this was a true encounter is that I was a disturbed child. I could imagine looking up at me with 3 hairy monsters in a square shape, passing a yellow ball with a red star on it. I did this so many times when I was a kid, and it would help me fall asleep. I used to color in my coloring books by drawing in tiny circles so I couldn't go outside the lines. I also was asked by my mother to pick the potatoes off the floor and throw them away. The potatoes kept rolling off the dustpan, so I organized the potatoes in a puzzle so they wouldn't fall off. One more strange thing about me was that whenever I ate chicken with bones, I would strip the meat off the bones and separate the bones into piles before I would eat my chicken. Now each of these moments will haunt me for the rest of my life, and the extra stuff is to help you believe in my story because it was a very tragic moment in my life, and I desperately want someone to believe me. I hope there are no hate comments, but I thought this was an interesting story and I wanted to share this with you. Something really strange and frightening happened one night back in 2005 during the summer. I'm not exaggerating, and I don't drink or do drugs. It was around 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. at night. My mom was serving dinner. My dad was a security guard at the time. That's why we had dinner late. My mom asked me to go to the car and get out a bottle of soda. My mom keeps the soda in the car. I didn't want to at first, cause the last 2 times, which was 2 days in a row, the front door would not open when I was outside, and no one locked the door either. And my mom and I believe the house is haunted. Anyway, I asked my brother Aaron to go to the car with me, cause I was afraid the door would lock on me again. And so me and Aaron went to the car, got the soda, and when I tried to open the front door, it wouldn't open. I could turn the knob, but it would not open. I knocked. On the door I heard my mom say it's not locked, and I told her it won't open. My mom tried opening the door and she couldn't, and then my dad tried and neither could he or my other brother. And so my mom told me and Erin to go around back and use the patio door. Erin already started walking ahead of me, but not too far ahead. As I was walking away from the door, I heard a low growl. I stopped, and so did Erin. We looked around and didn't see anything. I walked up to Erin and I heard it again. It sounded nearby and I still could not spot any dogs. I asked him if he had seen any dogs. He said no. We heard it again. Creeped out at this point, we ran towards the back of the house, and that's when I heard something jump on the car and then onto the roof of the house. My house only has one floor. We got to the patio door and it would not open. We banged on the patio door. My mom came to the door and told us she heard a loud thud on the roof, and I asked her to unlock the patio door. My mom looked at the lock and told me it wasn't locked. I tried again and it still would not open. We heard movement on the roof. Erin tried but couldn't get it to open. Mom tried and neither could she. The dogs ran to the patio door and started barking at the roof, walking back and forth. Erin wanted to run to the shed. He was panicking cause no one could get the door open and the dogs were barking. I told Erin to just stay against the wall. We heard more movement on the roof again. Erin told me that he didn't want to be out here in the open and that he thought we would be safer in the shed. We were whispering just so you know, and I told him that was not a good plan cause if the thing can jump from the car to the roof, I doubt we could make it to the shed, and even if we did, where would we go if it got in? I told him we are staying against the wall out of sight. Mom and them were still trying to get the door open and the dogs were still at the patio door barking, and Erin turned and told me at the count of 3 and I said no. Erin counts to 3 and starts running to the shed, and that's when Mom and them got the door open and the dogs run out to Erin and were growling and barking at the roof. Erin, me and the dogs all went back inside, and that's what happened. We never did see what it was.